Hey guys, welcome back to Chariot Palmistry. My name is Sulabh Jain and this is going to be a bit of a dark video. So I'm going to make some very difficult predictions about what I think is going to be happening to the United States of America later on this year. But to make sense out of this, let me throw up a screenshot of a video I made a couple months ago about the 2024 US presidential election to make sense of where we are in the world right now. So this is the roadmap of what I thought was going to be happening to America during and after the election. And as you can see, we've kind of graded a couple of these predictions already. There was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and I think that was around July of 2024. There were court problems and legal challenges for both candidates. I think Trump was being dragged to court, and then he'd go off onto a campaign stop and literally back to court and back to campaigning. Biden at one point was almost going to be impeached as well. And then my third prediction that the opinion polls will be wrong also came out. At the time they were saying that Kamala Harris would end up winning by a razor-thin margin. Instead, what ended up happening was Donald Trump won by a landslide. My fourth prediction that this time the election will actually be rigged. That didn't quite end up happening. So I've put a cross next to that prediction, but I'm not sure if it's a clear-cut case of an incorrect prediction here. You see, Joe Biden was kicked out of the running. He was the original candidate. He was kicked out by his party. And so to some degree, you could say perhaps that was a manipulation attempt from the Democrat side. You can also say that Trump was screaming about election fraud in the lead up to the election, but he hasn't proven any of that, even though he's president right now. That brings us back to predictions number 5, 6, and 7 here. So I want to talk about some of the civil unrest happening in America at the moment as the fifth prediction, and the sixth one, the really worrying prediction, one I think that's going to be happening later this year, is number 7. But first, let's talk about these riots and protests. You see, there's a new term in America right now that they call Tesla terrorism. Basically, there's a whole group of people in the US who, for whatever political reasons, don't like Elon Musk. And instead of writing him an angry letter about it, they're actually vandalizing or committing literal acts of arson and terrorism on Tesla sites, Tesla cars, Tesla dealerships as well. The FBI has recently come out and said that this is a form of domestic terrorism. They're going to start to prosecute these cases as such. And so I believe my fifth prediction that the aftermath of the 2024 US election would lead to some sort of riots and protest has actually come out. This situation, by the way, I think is actually going to be getting worse over the next couple months before it gets better. And the energy behind this is very different to the energy in the Floyd Mayweather protests that were going on in America years ago. By the way, we predicted that on this channel as well. But there's some craziness happening, at least in terms of violence with the US. Let's move on to the next prediction, because this is happening right now as we speak, behind closed doors. So I'm predicting some kind of economic bailout or money printing to happen between August of 24 through to June of 2025. And what's happening right now is gold is actually being revalued from an original $42 US dollars per ounce to $3,000 US dollars per ounce. Now, in and of itself, that's not really a big deal because the spot price of gold is around about $3,000 per ounce at the moment. Where the problem comes in is that the gold is actually owned by the US Federal Reserve, and it's being held by the US Treasury Department. So what's going to happen is the Treasury Department is going to say this gold that was $42 an ounce is now $3,000 an ounce, and the Federal Reserve has to print that money and circulate it back into the economy in order to have that $3,000 of gold per ounce. And if that explanation sounds weird and unusual to you, It really should be. That's basically the whole financial system. A weird and unusual way to take money out of one person's pocket and have it end up in another person's pocket. But I don't want to talk too much about that right now. The main point I'm trying to make though is by revaluing gold, the US is effectively going to print over $750 billion. And Trump's already said a lot of this money is going to go into buying strategic assets like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. But in addition to that, to put that $750 million into some sort of context, during the global financial crisis, the US printed only $430 billion. So right now, it's like they're printing almost double the amount, and there's no financial crisis going on at the moment. So that tells you that the US, or the president at least, sees some dark storm clouds on the horizon. They're starting to prepare for that right now. Now, to understand why this is happening, we need to have a look at the big picture energetically with the United States. I'm going to throw up a screenshot of a video I made in the early to middle part of 2020. And in that video, I predicted extreme social unrest for the US, Russia, Pakistan, and/or China. And my thesis in that video was that these four countries are going to be more or less following the same pattern. And what happened in America, of course, there was the Floyd Mayweather protests. That led to a few states actually talking about seceding, and there wasn't quite an assassination attempt on Trump, but he did get COVID at that point in time. Now, the reason I throw up this screenshot is show that the energy of America back at that point in time was pretty much the same as Pakistan, China, and Russia. There wasn't anything specifically unique about the US at that stage. Now I'll throw up a screenshot of a video I made towards the end of 2020 about the political predictions on the election cycle going on then. So for the 2020 presidential election predictions I made, the first one there you'll see is I'm predicting political insecurity in Britain. And reading between the lines, what that basically means is at that point in time, America was following the schema or the roadmap of England. And just to go through these predictions real quick, most of them pretty much ended up happening. I think a couple British prime ministers resigned in a short space of time. Both Biden and Trump did have scandals in September. I think there was a Hunter Biden laptop thing at that point. The outcome for the election was uncertain. Some states talked about seceding. A dollar crisis, bond market crisis happened. The results were delivered in December. The last prediction there, where I was saying that there'd be an injury or an accident to the head of the president, I'm not sure how that quite played out. Because Biden, he ended up winning the election, and he went really down the deep end with his dementia. Also, President Trump, he did end up getting shot in the ear, but that didn't happen till July of 2024. And so this brings the discussion back to the big picture of what's happening with America. Started out following Pakistan, China and Russia, then started following England, and now is following Pakistan alone. If you want to know the future of the US for the next 6 to 12 months, look at the headlines coming out of Pakistan. Now, I also want to bring in some predictions that I've made from other videos as well, and I'll just talk about them very briefly. I think that there's going to be a big financial crisis hitting the world in the second half of 2026. And it could just be that all this money printing that the Americans are doing is like the first step in that direction to maybe avoid that catastrophe, or could just be maybe the powers that be are incompetent. They're printing the money to make themselves look good so that when or if that crisis happens later on, it's going to be far more devastating. We should pay very close attention to that as well. I'm also predicting a war or a new global conflict starting up in the aftermath of that financial crisis. That brings me back to the 7th prediction I made for the 2024 presidential election. And this is the worrying one because I'm actually predicting terrorist or separatist attacks. My basis for thinking this is basically because that's what happened in Pakistan. Now, these are predictions I always hope that I'm wrong on because I don't want to be the guy on YouTube who stands up and says, look how great I am, I predicted this thing, whilst People are suffering and dying. So let's hope I get this one wrong. But if you have family or friends in the US, you'd want to be having a quick little chat to them about their security. But I'm just going to end this conversation on that note. I don't want to go too much into these dark, death-like predictions, except to say that this is probably what's going to happen to the US. I'm going to end this video on that note, guys. If you do have any questions, put them in the comment section below. Thanks a lot.